Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about the all-new Ram Dakota. Before we get into this video though, as always, if you want to save time and money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. Let's get into it. The Ram Dakota has been an annoying truck over the last few years because it seems like we just keep hearing that it's coming back, and then never mind, and then it's coming back, and then never mind, and this situation kind of feels like that again because there's been a lot of talk yet again that, hey, it's coming back, and I'm just waiting for the not yet, right? That's just how it feels. But anyways, let's talk about what the specs would be on the Ram Dakota if this time is the time. And I think there's actually a higher chance of it coming back now more than ever, and I'll kind of explain that as the video goes on. So, first off, the most likely candidate for a platform for the Dakota would be the same platform that the Jeep Gladiator is built off of, because that is a mid-size truck, and the Ram Dakota is also a mid-size truck. Now, the Dakota surely would not have solid front and rear axles like the Gladiator. They would likely swap out the solid front axle for independent front suspension, just like a lot of other mid-size trucks in the segment. Right now, the Gladiator is the only mid-size truck that you can get in the US at least that has solid front and rear axles. Everything else uses a solid rear axle and independent front suspension. But it still would have, pretty similar suspension to the Gladiator overall, I think. I don't think that Ram would swap out the rear suspension, for example, with leaf springs. I think that they would do some sort of multi-link setup similar to what the Ram 1500 has. It seems like Ram is slowly trying to integrate multi-link into more and more trucks, because if you look at Ram's lineup right now, the 1500 has multi-link, the 2500 has multi-link, and the 3500 has leaf springs. And so, yeah, they only have one application right now where they actually still utilize leaf springs. But moving on from suspension to engine options, which is the most interesting topic, and this is where things get kind of complicated, because the obvious choice to use would be the 3.6 liter V6 that they have used in a bunch of their vehicles across the years. I mean, you can still get a Ram 1500 with the V6. The Gladiator comes with a V6 as standard, and just pretty much every Stellantis vehicle seems to have this V6 paired to an 8-speed automatic transmission. That being said, there are a bunch of other powertrains that Stellantis now has under their umbrella that could be pretty fun in a Ram Dakota. First of which is the Ecodiesel Powertrain. So in the Gladiator, it produces 260 horsepower and then 442 pound-feet of torque, which is really strong for a mid-size truck. Frankly, that's strong for a half-ton truck as well in terms of a little diesel powertrain. And so that would be a pretty fun engine to have in the Dakota. And I think that it would actually outsell the Ram 1500 Ecodiesel, frankly, because that engine just really makes sense for the weight, towing capacity, and just overall size of a mid-size truck. Now, moving from that, we also have the 4xe powertrain that Stellantis is pushing quite a bit. Right now, that's in the Grand Cherokee and in the Wrangler. It will soon be in the Gladiator as well. It's a turbocharged 2-liter 4-cylinder that's paired to a hybrid system, produces 375 horsepower and 470 pound-feet of torque. And again, those numbers would be absolutely monstrous for a mid-size truck. The only thing that would have power even close to this would be the new Ford Ranger Raptor, which is going to have somewhere around 400 horsepower and mid-400s for the torque. But aside from that, nothing else would be even close. I mean, even the new Chevy Colorado and GMC Canyon are only at 310 horsepower, and then 430 pound-feet of torque is no joke, but it's not 470 pound-feet of torque. So that's another powertrain that could make quite a bit of sense in the Dakota, and that would also give the Dakota a really good fuel economy rating, which would help out with Stellantis' overall fuel economy rating, which is really important in the next few years because governments are getting really strict about fuel economy ratings. Now, from a payload capacity perspective, I think it would be safe to assume that they would just try to make it as competitive as possible within the mid-size truck segment, so somewhere in the mid-teens for the payload, and then maybe higher up packages on the Dakota would be in the lower teens, similar again to other mid-sized trucks. And then towing capacity somewhere in the 7,000 pound range, again, just to be competitive within the segment. Now, from an interior perspective, this is where I think things could get really exciting. And also, frankly, I guess we should also talk about exterior as well in terms of the styling. With both of these elements, I think that they would basically just take the Ram 1500 and just shrink it down because they would just kind of use that styling. And frankly, that just makes sense. That's kind of what Ram has done with their trucks already, because you have the Ram 1500 and then you have the 2500 and 3500, which, yeah, the styling is unique to those trucks, but it's kind of just like a bigger, bulkier, boxier version of the 1500 styling with the 2500 and 3500. So this could just be, I guess, like a less bulky, less aggressive version of the 1500, or they could go the other route and make it even more aggressive. And I think another thing that they would be able to do, because they've got quite a bit of flexibility with this being a new truck, is kind of go for that cool wide body type appearance that like the new Colorado has, where the fenders bulge out quite a bit. It seems like that's a really popular thing to do with mid-size trucks, because every single mid-size truck kind of has that wider, bulgier appearance with the fenders, just to make it so that they look bigger than they are, because again, ultimately they are the small, they're not actually the smallest truck we have in the US anymore, because we've got the Hyundai Santa Cruz now, which is tiny, and then obviously the Ford Maverick as well. And then it would surely share a lot of elements from the Ram 1500 from an interior perspective. So 12-inch display at the center, and then the Ram 1500 is getting a new digital gauge cluster pretty soon. It sounds like most likely some of the 2023 model year Ram 1500s will have this digital gauge cluster, and so it would be pretty safe to assume that they would also have that in higher up packages on the Ram Dakota, and then the lower down packages would still get an analog gauge cluster, and then obviously smaller infotainment system. But basically, just take the Ram 1500 interior and just throw that into the Dakota, and then, you know, obviously make the dimensions smaller overall, and that is probably what they would do from an interior perspective, and have frankly similar packages to what the 1500 has, because they have built a very strong marketing, I guess, thing around the 1500 packages. So you'd probably have a Bighorn Dakota, and then you'd have like a Laramie, and then maybe a Limited at the top. Typically with mid-sized trucks, they don't have nearly as many packages as full-size trucks, so we probably wouldn't see a lot of the in-between packages. And then maybe we would get basically a Rebel version that would be the off-road version, and then potentially we could get like a TRX version of the Dakota. Think about that, Dakota TRX. And that's, again, where those multiple powertrains definitely come into play, because you could have the base model engine be that 3.6 liter V6, then you have the diesel as an option, and then they could use either the 4xe, or they could use the new Hurricane powertrain, which is a twin turbo 3-liter inline six that's in base format is going to produce like 400 horsepower at least, and then almost 500 pound-feet of torque into the Dakota, and that could be the Dakota TRX, which I think that thing would sell amazingly well. A mid-sized truck with a turbocharged inline six, and they basically could just work with Bill Stein again and just build advanced shocks, and frankly they could just take the TRX Blackhawk shocks and just kind of shrink them down a little bit. It's really easy to take technology that was developed for a much bigger vehicle and implant it into a smaller vehicle than to scale up. Typically, not all the time, but that's typically how things work. And so I know it's a lot to take in, but there is a lot that could happen with this Ram Dakota, and I think that frankly it could be a very successful mid-sized truck if it was executed properly. If they release the Ram Dakota with several Halo packages with really cool powertrains, and then they release also affordable packages with more reasonable powertrains as well. With that being said, that's going to sum things up for today's video. Let me know what you guys think about the Ram Dakota. What would be the perfect spec for you if Ram was to officially bring it back? Because again, it sounds like it's coming, but like, I just don't want to get my hopes up too much, because every single time I start to get my hopes up, it's like it gets completely just like bus rolled by something. But yeah, just what would be the perfect Dakota? If Ram were to release a new Dakota, what would you want from a spec perspective, engine perspective, all of that stuff? And with that being said, I will see all of you in that next video.